This is the first day of this September 1980 7-day sesshin. Before we will get into the reading and commenting, let's first say a few words about being in the sesshin and not being in the sesshin. Right now in the Buddha Hall, there are quite a number of people who would hope to get into the sesshin and who are not in this zendo right now. Half of the people who applied had to be turned down, which does not mean turned down forever. You're in this sesshin today, you may not be in the next sesshin. You're out in the Buddha Hall today, you may be in the next sesshin. Let us assure all of you that we're working very hard to make the right decision. But there never is any right decision. For one person here, one person is not here. Is this right? Is this wrong? I don't know. Not being in sesshin, can you work with this disappointment or this impatience? Whatever has come up. Some people said they were glad that there's a possibility of giving someone else a chance, even though they had wanted to be here. Can one work with all these feelings, ideas of oneself and others, what one should do, should not be doing, and work where one is? Your zendo ultimately is within yourself. Maybe someday we hope we can have more teisho out in the Buddha Hall, maybe have more sitting right alongside with the sesshin. We've no definite plans yet, but we'll work on this. There are many people who would really like to sit with a sesshin, even if they can't be physically present within the walls of this building here. So maybe something can be worked out. Ultimately, it doesn't count how many sesshins you participate in, but how you live and work from moment to moment. Can one be in touch, come in touch with this deep inner silence, which doesn't hanker, and lets the conditions be as they are, and yet not drift along with them? You really need to get to sesshin, just fill a paper and tell us why. Knock and bang on the door. And as to listening to teisho, it's not just a following of the words. Can there be, instead of just following with these words, which means one's always following behind a step, can there be a moving with the words and with the spirit of the words? In that there are not 2 or 56 minds. Not to dig in what one already has heard and known about what one hears. Not to compare, not to have any opinions. But to listen thoroughly, openly. And maybe can one see within oneself the truth of these words, what they point at. Because the words are never the real thing, and the real thing isn't the real thing. It is no thing. So can no thing be listening? For the beginning of the sesshin, maybe the first and second teishos, we will read from the chapter from the Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch on repentance, resolution. One is carrying such heavy burdens of past doings, past thoughts, past guilt. They become obstructions in the sesshin. One can really get caved in, snowed in by them. So it'll be very good right at the beginning to clear this up, so that when it comes up in the course of the sesshin, it can be irradiated with awareness and melt like ice melts under the impact of the sun. The chapter begins. This is the Sixth Patriarch addressing an assembly. Seeing at that time that scholars and laymen from Guangzhou, Shaochao, and the surrounding areas had gathered together in the mountain to hear the Dharma, the great master took his seat and addressed them, saying, "Draw near, all of you. Draw near." What we're concerned with here must arise from within our self-nature, not just be conceptualized and memorized or evoked from memory. At all times, as thought follows thought, one's mind must be naturally quiet. We could put it into a question form. As thought follows thought, can the mind be naturally quiet? There are intervals, pauses, gaps, spaces between all thoughts. Can one put the practice, the counting, the awareness of the breathing, the moo or the who, right into these gaps with a silent mind that does not do battle with thoughts? It does not do battle with anything, because battle is thinking and drainage of energy and conflict and division and caving in eventually under all this whirlpool of thought activity. And yet there's always a gap. Moo, hoo, the breathing. As thought follows thought, can one's mind be naturally quiet? Quiet not meaning going to sleep, sitting back for something to happen, but questioning, attending, right through these gaps. By cultivating and practicing this for yourselves, you're not doing this for the teacher. Can one drop this age-old idea of doing this for the teacher, for the mother, for the father, for the boss? Doing it for yourselves. come to clarity within yourself. This is where clarity must begin. It's only where clarity can begin, in yourself. By cultivating and practicing this for yourselves, you may realize your own Dharma body. Your own Dharma body not being this pain-racked body. And yet it embraces the pain without caving in. You may realize your own Dharma body, which is form and yet emptiness. Pain and no pain. Anguish and no anguish. And realize that your mind is Buddha. Undivided. No limits. No beginning and no end, no time. It is only by delivering and disciplining yourselves that your coming here will not be in vain. It's only what one does oneself. Things having been pointed out to one, and then one can look and work for oneself with understanding and clarity. Even in the midst of confusion, there can be a clear perception of the fact that one is confused, can't there? Only we don't keep it clear. I think we should do something about this confusion, which only adds to it. Right in the midst of this fog, relentlessly, with trust, in one knows not what. We will later be having opportunity to talk about this disciplining oneself. Wei Nang is not using this word discipline in the conventional sense. Controlling oneself, forcing oneself, making oneself, unmaking oneself. It's not used this way here. Because the controller, the maker, the overcomer is that mess that he or she is trying to overcome. Or is there something separate in here? It's better and clearer than the rest. And there's clear perception, clear seeing. There is no me, there's no controller, no overcomer. And what needs to be overcome is seen as being empty. And that this division is totally intellectual. This division into the controller and what he or she needs to control in a one process of confusion or anger, whatever. Moo! What is it all? Can it be questioned? not knowing. In that there is no division, because in that there is no judgment. Since you've come here, Wei Nang continues, from so far, since you've come here from so far and so near, our meeting at this place implies a karmic affinity. Obviously there is an affinity, or else you wouldn't be here. Don't search for explanations, there are none. You're here. So can one work here without digging back to past karma or future karma? There's still this thought activity buzzing around, which is such entertainment. We complain about it, but it is entertainment. Because as long as this is buzzing around, one doesn't have to face stark facts, which is that one is nothing. Nobody special. Nobody outstanding. Nobody. Not knowing who or what one is. Now, will you all kneel on one knee? Well, you can stay on your cushion. That'd be quite an arduous thing during this whole thing, to kneel on one knee, but maybe a good posture for this, I don't know. First, we will talk about the self-nature and the 5 fragrances of the Dharma body. If you can't see the Dharma body and touch it, maybe you can smell it. Fragrance being that which comes up from the blossom. It's not the blossom itself, but it's that which envelops. And which envelops everybody near that blossom. Everybody can smell it. And then I will instruct you in the formless repentance. Everyone then knelt. The master said, the first fragrance is discipline. Actually, the word originally meant an art of learning, a field of learning. And the disciple is one who is learning. Not one who is disciplined or who submits to discipline, which means formal rules, which one may or may not have to adopt for. Like for the sesshin, we have umpteen rules, which are very necessary, and if they are followed without resistance, then they are no obstruction. They aid in the smooth flow of a sesshin. Or as Shunryu Suzuki once said, it is within the framework of these rules that one can express one's freedom. Not that one thinks, I must have my own way. That's not freedom. That's burden. That's slavery to your idea and your training of what you think is your own way, or your reaction, what other people have thought should be a way. Now you react to it, and you find some different thing in reaction to that. It's not freedom. Can one live within a reasonable set of rules? Reasonable, not arbitrarily imposed for the satisfaction of the imposer. That can do damage, first of all to the imposer and also to those who then chafe under this. That like in totalitarian countries, totalitarian families, totalitarian groups. But if these rules are reasonable, one understands them. One agrees to them. One has helped set them up. Or if one has a suggestion, to make that suggestion freely. So one is part of this whole thing. Then these rules are no confinement. They allow one to shed these ideas of having to act in this way or that way. It's no guarantee, but it's a possibility. The first fragrance is discipline, meaning learning with open eyes, an open body mind, without the compulsion of past training, past habits, past molding, past education, past conditioning, past habits. Wei Nang says this discipline is to have one's mind thoroughly without disparagement and without evil, without envy and without greed or anger, without violence and without destructiveness. This is called the fragrance of discipline. To have one's mind thoroughly without disparagement. Which means if there's disparagement, it must be seen without disparagement. Which means no me riding the saddle of disciplining. Discipline means learning about oneself, about one's tendency to disparage oneself and others. Why does one do it? Well, for one thing, it lets off steam. It also gives one a sense of superiority, because in disparagement there's always comparison. One disparages others, immediately implied in this is the one who is disparaging is superior to the one that he or she disparages. So it feeds the me. Or being disparaging about oneself, deriving what doesn't seem to be pleasure, but it is a perverted kind of pleasure from beating oneself. Can this come into the light of awareness so the mind can be thoroughly free from that? Because there's nothing in it except division, screens, fog. Have one's mind thoroughly without evil. Evil always coming into being when there's evil intention of hurting, which is the me in its blindness, in its inattentiveness. Yet one true samadhi extinguishes evils. Samadhi being no sense of me. And there's no sense of me, and there's no evil intention. How could there be? But the me in all its machinations must be seen, must not be denied or swept under the rug of having images of being this or that. And that there's no clarity and that there's no melting of the ice. Without envy. Envy for others' capabilities, others' realization, whatever that means in one's own deluded mind. Envy for others' good looks, good fortune, good wives or husbands, always looking in from the outside. That's what envy is, looking in from the outside rather than looking, being with, being at one, being intimate and familiar with those who one envies. Maybe one finds out what one thought one envied isn't even there. Maybe these other people are just as human beings as we are, with all their difficulty, struggles, sorrow. Maybe, maybe not. And if they're just good people, without envy and jealousy, then to be near them, like we read the other day from Dogen, to be near a good person is like walking through the fog and becoming damp. In this becoming damp, thoroughly moistened, in that there is no indoctrination. It happens on its own. And there's no envy, no jealousy, but nearness, intimacy, affection. Which means no preconceived ideas, which means the preconceived ideas must be seen and seen through, so they don't become distorting spectacles. You see how important it is to see oneself without judgment. The judgment is a waste of energy. Facts speak for themselves. They don't need to be judged. They are what they are. It is all in the clear seeing, which is given to every human being. Before you know it's the sound of a car, there is a perception, an absolutely clear perception of that. Then comes the thought, it's a car, and why does he have to start up right in the midst of Teisho? Why do these people have to be so noisy in the street, disturbing my Zazen? Your Zazen embraces all that. Your Zazen is not exclusive, it is all inclusive. Ooh, all inclusive. Whether it's rock music or the veterans marching out there, we've had that too. Without greed or anger, greed for quietness, greed for progress, greed for this kind of a sesshin or that kind of a sesshin. Greed, which means always moving away from where one is right now. Where is one? Oh, who? Or just this breathing, not knowing where one is or who one is. Miraculously, you'll find your way into the dining room when the bell sounds. You'll find your way to the soup. Even if you practice on the mat, not knowing. which is not come by easily. It is practice, practice, practice. Not practice not knowing, but practicing, questioning. In the midst of all this turmoil of thought and wanting and not wanting, particularly in the beginning days of the sesshin. Without greed or anger, if there's no wanting something in the greedy sort of a way, then there will be no anger at not getting it. And if anger arises, hoo or moo, not to spin around with it forever. One does spin around with it. To see that there's a gap. Hoo or moo. Or just the breathing being the anger. They're not two. Without violence and destructiveness. Violence with oneself, destructiveness with oneself. The me trying to destroy itself, which is the me at work. The me reveling in destructiveness. Can the me be left alone? Can it be left to itself, on the periphery as it were, without feeding it any energy? Like children, if they get into this spell at times where you just do one thing after another just to get your goat. Doesn't matter if it's an angry goat. And by scolding them or chiding them or hitting them or punishing them, one is feeding that. Can the pool become still and the mud settle on its own? Moo. Or hoo. The breathing or just sitting. The second is the fragrance of equanimity. This is to behold all things, good and evil, all circumstances and forms, without being confused in one's mind. This is called the fragrance of equanimity. Beholding all things, it's a beautiful word to use. All things, good and evil, behold them, meaning embracing them or comprehending them. Rather than having an opinion about a person from what one already knows or wants this person to be or doesn't want this person to be like, can one just behold that person as he is, as she is? With open eyes. And ears and arms. in this, that person has a chance to move freely. Because the person who is tagged feels that being tagged. A child who is tagged feels that being tagged. Whether it's expressed in words or not. It's also possible that the person who is beheld freely does not feel that. It's closed to that. Because he or she projects onto the other person. Can one behold that and see that? How we ourselves are caught, how other people are caught in ideas of themselves. Can one behold all things good and evil, all circumstances and forms without being confused in one's own mind? Confusion coming in when the thought comes in, it shouldn't be this way. I must change that. I must do something about this. The doing is in the beholding, without division. All, what is it in the Hakuin Zenji's chant? All good deeds, repentance, giving, following the precepts, all comes from Zazen. Zazen being that practice in non-duality, that questioning, not knowing, not dividing, questioning. Out of that comes change on its own. Because in that the ego is at rest. This is called the fragrance of equanimity. Many people, particularly when one works very hard on oneself, maybe one's mind's eye has been opened somewhat to some degree, and tend to get very discouraged at what they see and discover in themselves. The discouragement and coming partly from the idea that once this mind's eye is open, then all of this should drop off, not be there anymore. Should be a walking deva. One has garnered these things from reading things and then remembering them out of context, or else the context hasn't been given. Often reads an enlightenment story which was written at the time. You don't read all the sequels to that. There are sequels to that. One doesn't forever walk around in this transcendental bliss, or the samadhi of innocent play, or whatever all these states have been called. One needs to work. See all these old habits come up and not get discouraged. Doesn't matter what one sees, it's in the seeing without discouragement. As a saying by Dogen, which may be very helpful for all of us. In the feeling of inadequacy, of body and mind, the Dharma is fulfilled. We could say in a seeing, because in the seeing all the senses work together. Hearing, feeling, seeing. Of the inadequacies of body and mind, the Dharma is fulfilled, or is fulfilling itself newly all the time. Know also, Dogen continues, that in the feeling that the Dharma has been fulfilled by body and mind, there is yet something lacking. Know also that in the feeling that the Dharma has been fulfilled by body and mind, there is yet something lacking. We can say something vitally lacking. Because this is just an idea without observing. When there's freedom from envy or jealousy, then there's no thought of the Dharma being fulfilled or not fulfilled, because then there's no me to ponder fulfillment or non-fulfillment. It is the steep discontent with one's actions and words and habits which is the fuel for practice. And yet not to become frantic over this. Franticness is drainage of fuel, is wastage of fuel. Can one work on the zazen like a mountain? As it was once said, as a mountain oblivious of other mountains arising next to it. We will end here for today and carry on tomorrow. We will now recite the 4 vows.
All beings without number.
I vow to the great, endless, blind passion. I vow to uproot Dhamma beyond measure. I vow to penetrate the
Sippy, send it off for Keeney.